Hello, hello everyone. Nicole here from Team Amelia. Hello, hello. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me all right. I always worry sometimes that you guys can't, and I want to make sure that you can hear me. If you're new here and you're like, who's this? Where's Amelia? Hi, I'm Nicole from Team Amelia. I'm a licensed competition coach and judge and FEI writer, and sometimes I sub in for Amelia when she's not available. So Amelia is off adventuring right now. So you get me. Yay. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I don't see anyone here yet, and I want to make sure that you can hear me just right. Let me check to see if it's on YouTube. Always worries me that I'm not live. Oh, yep, it is here live. Fantastic. Please let me know in the chat if you are here. Tonight we are talking about caring for our older, more senior horses. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this. It's so important that we care for our equine partners through their whole life. And sometimes when our Goldie oldies get a little older, they really are such a treasure, but they sometimes need a little bit of extra TLC. Oh, yes. Okay. Gina's here. Janet's here. Great. Feel free to share your win in the chat below. Before we get started, I want to do a few little reminders. The first one is that we have very exciting in September. 30 Days to Round is coming back. So yay, so exciting. So keep an eye on your email for that or your notifications. We are going to be, it's so much fun. This is the 4th year we've done it. And I will say the first year when Amelia pitched it to me, I was like, this isn't going to work. This is going to be a nightmare. We can't do this. And I was such a negative Nelly about it. And she was like, yes, we can. And she did. And people see amazing results from this program. It really breaks things down into a really attainable, understanding way. And it's a lot of fun to see the horses and the people progress and have light bulb moments, and the transformations are really incredible. So 30 Days to Round is coming back. And if you are interested in learning more about content and connection and you're not sure about 30 Days to Round, please come to our Contact and Connection webinar. It is happening on September 7th at noon Pacific time. The link should be around here somewhere to join. And it is always a fun event to come to the webinar. And we are also having we're having another fun event in Amelia's Dressage Club on Facebook. If you use hashtag frame with a photo of your horse and tell us a little bit about what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, you have a chance to win your enrollment into 30 Days to Round. So it's always a fun activity to do. It's always fun to see that involvement within the club and see people assessing their own riding and thinking about it. And what the best part is you have a chance to win your entry. And if you already enrolled and you paid for your entry, we then give you that money back. So it's always, don't hesitate to participate in the activity. It's a lot of fun. So with that, let us get started. Let me pull up my questions. And if you see me looking to the side, that's just because I have 2 screens up. I'm a 2-screen kind of girly. So we're talking about our senior horses and riding and caring for our senior horses. So Linda says, how do you know when, what, and how much joint supplements to give them? Do they need to be worked the same amount or less or more? How old / what was the oldest dressage horse still competing? Ooh, great question. So let's tackle them one by one. How do you know when, what, and how much joint supplements to give them? That is very dependent on your horse, their genetics and conformation, the amount of work they've been doing in their whole life, and what work they are continuing to do. I always default to what my vet tells me and for what supplements to use and why, and then how much of them is usually there's like manufacturer's recommendations. And the reason why is because if you have a horse that worked really hard or had a really intensive career when they were younger, and you're asking them to still work, at a moderate level when they're older, they're going to need more care and support than a horse that is a little bit more, isn't needing as tough of a job. So for example, growing up, we had a lovely horse named Madison. I think he was around 22 when we got him, and he was a Grand Prix jumper. And so he jumped competitively until he was like 18. So old for a competitive jumper. He did like the meter 60s. Like he was phenomenal. He was a bang up horse. But that does mean he had more wear and tear on his body. And so when we got him and we were trying to do like first level with him, which was totally within his capabilities, he needed a bit more maintenance and support with him, right? if we had just done, walk trot lessons or pony rides with him, he probably wouldn't have needed as much like maintenance and support because we weren't asking him to do a harder, more moderate work. It was fairly light work, right? So you have to consider the job your horse did, the condition that they're in, and then what you're asking them to do. And that will help you to decide what supplement and then of how much and stuff like that. So, and then do they need to be worked the same amount, less or more? So that depends a little bit. I'm always of the inclination that motion is motion. So the more you can get your horse out moving and going up and down hills and light stretchy work and turnout is fantastic. That is all really good low impact work for your horses that is really good for their body, right? Just like us as humans, the more stationary we are, the more stiff we get. So the more work we can do just stretching and moving and walking and hours doing that is fantastic. But depending on the level of work, right? So I've been very blessed to ride some lovely schoolmasters in my day that are a little bit more seasoned, but they are FEI horses and they're a little bit older. And so what I did, and I still do, is I make sure that at least 2 or 3 times a week, I do more lighter work, more stretchy work, more connection work, rather than drilling the FEI work 5 or 6 days a week. And, you shouldn't really be doing that with a horse anyways, but what I did was I accounted for the harder work they were doing by adjusting the level of work they did each day and throughout the week. So you kind of have to play it a little bit by ear, but generally speaking, the more they can get out and more walking they can do, the better. I know some people, they take their older horse for a walk in the morning under like a little tack walk. Then they'll put their horse away. The horse will have a couple hours in turnout, have lunch, and then they'll come back and they'll do their lesson in the afternoon. And their horse will be more loose and limber. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that, but it does. I do find it helps keep them a little bit more supple. How old / was the oldest horse Joshua still competing? That's very interesting. I think the oldest at the Olympics was 18. I think one of our Canadian horses was 18, 19 when he competed, but doesn't mean they can't be a little older. I know there was an eventing horse that was like 22 at Paris. And definitely some of at the national shows, I've seen them go up to 26, 27. You don't necessarily see the FEI horses competing into their mid 20s, but you'll definitely see them, competing with in some of the national tests. They'll take a step down and they'll take care of some riders and go be doing some other ones. So it's definitely possible to go out and compete and enjoy your horses at shows into their 20s, just as long as you're accounting for the workload and the number of days you're showing them. I know with my older horses, I don't always do 3 days of full showing. I do 2 days, or I give them the break in the middle, because being in the stall without the turnout and doing the harder FEI tests, it's sometimes by the 3rd day, they're like, I'm too stiff and it's not cool to keep going, right? So you have to kind of play a little bit by ear and be considerate of your animals when you're taking them to compete in their senior years. Great, really great questions. All right, next up is Carrie says, how do we help our horse? How can we help our horses when they age? What are recommendations for supplements, stretches, grain? That's really great. Like I said, motion is motion. The more turnout you can give them, that where they're stretching and interacting by themselves and self-exercising is really helpful. And accounting for their workload, right? Being considerate, when they're in their prime, they're going to be able to take more weight behind. They're going to be able to do more of the continuous days on without feeling like they're being a little pushed a little bit. It's being considerate of our animals so we don't work them too hard. And then also finding the ways that we can help save their legs and their body. So, for example, extensions are really hard on the horses, right? So when I school my FEI guys, my senior guys, I don't practice the extensions at home. I like very rarely / never. I don't, because it's a lot of wear and tear on their body. So I don't push that for them. I save that for the competition ring, or / I don't do it at all. I might do little lengthens back and forth just to get the reaction, but I don't ask them to go all the way from one corner to the other corner in extension, because that's really can be hard on them. So it's thinking about that. The other thing we can do as they age is thinking about their routine and their environment. So for example, we have a lovely horse in our barn. She's 26 years old this year, lovely mare. And we go out hacking in the back with her all the time on the property, but she does not come to the park with us when we go to the park to ride the other horses, because the park, there's a lot more stuff going on. There's dogs, there's a lot more, bridges and things and hills. And that's just, even getting on and off the trailer is a lot more strenuous for her. So we adjust her, what we do with her to help her as she age. Things like getting massages and chiro can also be helpful. Sometimes getting a little bit of a Tylenol for your horses, either injectable or ingestible, can help them be a little bit more comfortable under saddle. That's what we call maintenance, whether that's something that you feed them versus an injectable, just to help them feel a little bit more at ease with the work they're doing. It helps them be able to do their job for a little bit longer and stay happier and more comfortable. And so stretches are always great too. Doing carrot stretches, asking them to lift their back, and riding our horses round is one of the best things we can do for our horses. I remember growing up, we had to, and this is before I had my own pony. We had these cool school horses, and one of them was named Peppy, and he was he must have been in his mid-20s. And my instructor always said, I think this is going to be the year that we pulled him out of the field after winter, and I think this is going to be this last year that he retires. But then what would happen is she would teach on him, and he would lift his back and go around, and he'd get a little bit more supple because he was round. And by the end of the season, she'd be like, he looks pretty great. Let's go for another year. And so he actually got a few more seasons because he was being worked properly and he was carrying his body properly. And, he wasn't being asked to do difficult things, but when you carry yourself just like us in better balance and posture, the rest of our muscles and our joints and things can do their job more properly and more biomechanically. So riding our horses round is probably one of the best things we can do for them under saddle, to help them feel better for longer. Tracy says, what is the best way to ensure the back joints, tendon, and ligaments are warmed up properly? Ooh, great question. Personally, I like turnout. I want to, especially for my older horses, I make sure they're able to go out each morning for a little stretch and a roll around before I get on them and ask them to do their actual workout. Because then they've had a chance to go walk around and interact with the environment and stretch themselves out at their own pace. The other thing that I do is I make sure I follow the training scale. So establishing a self-maintained rhythm before I ask for more tighter turns or connection work. So what that means is, at the walk, can I put my leg on and they're marching around and they're going by themselves, and I don't have to keep nagging them forward, or I don't have to keep pulling them back. If they're able to maintain that rhythm in the walk themselves for 5 or 10 minutes and they're like, I'm good, I'm feeling good, then you've got a decent rhythm and you can go up into your trot warm up and things like that. And then the same thing, can they maintain the rhythm as themselves, or are they backing off? And that's a really good way, because if the horse is struggling to maintain that self-maintained rhythm themselves, that might mean they're a little bit stiffer or a little bit less comfortable, and they need that extra few minutes to warm up properly. It's a great question. Kiki says, different ideas to make the warm-up more interesting and effective, please. I have to walk a bit longer before my old mare will trot, and I feel like I could make better use of the long walk. Ooh, great question. I love going outside, going for a hack around the barn if it's safe. That really, really makes me feel good when I can go out with my horses and interact with the environment outside. I guess you guys might be getting, I like to go outside with my horses. I like to have my horses moving before I get on them, but I loved doing a little walk around the property if you have access to that. If you don't have the ability to go outside, or maybe your horse might still be a bit fresh to go straight outside for your walk warm up, sometimes doing groundwork makes it a little bit more interesting, doing a few exercises on the ground, getting them a little limber before you get on. The other one that I really like, and it's a little bit of a suppleness exercise, but it's not dramatic, so it's okay to do in the warm up, in the walk warm up, is I put my reins on a buckle. Theoretically, my horse should be on the buckle or have a soft contact when I'm walk warming up. And what I do is I just kind of go down the quarter line, and as my horse is swinging in the walk, I apply a little bit more inside leg, And I just kind of get the shoulder to move over a little bit. And then I relax my leg and say, good girl. And then I do it the other way and move over. And so it's just kind of, it's not a leg yield per se. It's just getting mobility in the shoulders by asking a little bit move over. And because I don't have contact, it's not really a leg yield. It's not a connecting exercise. It's more just a suppling exercise. And I kind of like that because it kind of gets the body swinging, gets me thinking about my rider position in my seat. It gets me counting the rhythm, because if the rhythm isn't forward, I can't get the timing to push the shoulders over just a little. So I really like that one to make it a little bit more interesting for myself. Sometimes riding with a friend also. Sometimes I'll pop on Amelia's ride along podcasts. She's got some great walk specific ones. And then it like gets me realigned with my body, thinking about setting my intentions, things like that. And then before you know it, the 10 minutes has passed. Great question. Nancy says, do the PEMF and magnetic blankets help older horses? Yes, for sure. And they definitely help all horses. I've seen the reactions and the changes in myself in my horses when I do it, and some of the other ones. Depending on the machine you have, depends a little bit of like how much they help. And I think it's kind of the same thing like when you go to a spa and get a massage versus when you go to a registered massage therapist at like your chiropractor's office. One is going to make, they're both going to make you feel good, but one is going to get really far in there and really help you. So depending on what machine you're using, you might get a little bit more of an effect out of one than the other, but they definitely do help the horses for sure. Renee asks, how do you know when it's time to stop riding? That's a really good question. And it's different for every horse. Sometimes it's a little bit more obvious. People will say things. They'll say, oh, he's a little uneven today. Or you'll go to the show and you might get rung out, a couple tests in a row. And he's a little uneven. He's a little struggling, that sort of stuff. Generally speaking, what I say is if they're struggling to do the work you're asking of them at that level, it's consistently, like day after day, week after week, they're struggling to maintain the level. Then it's time to go to change the workload. Just because your horse can't be an FEI horse anymore, or a fourth level horse, or a first level horse, doesn't mean that their career is over and they should just go into the field. Oftentimes that, they have a step down person that maybe it's a grandkid that gets to ride them and gets to go trail riding them instead. Maybe it's instead of doing third level, they get to go and teach somebody how to do leg yields and be a little bit more of a schooling horse at home for, kids learning how to ride. It's defining how you can give a step down job, and really being honest with yourself with the assessment and thinking about your plan with your vet and thinking, okay, like maybe they need to make sure that when they come in the spring, we're, assessing the hocks, we're assessing the rhythm, that sort of thing, talk with your farrier if he's stumbling a lot, things like that. The balance, it's hard to maintain the balance. Those are things that indicators. Sometimes horses will get a little bit of a shake in some of their legs, and that's, it's time to take a step back or to retire or semi-retire them. I'm a firm believer in, we have to do what's right for our horses. Sometimes it's not easy, but just because your dreams with that horse are coming to a close doesn't mean the relationship with the horse is coming to a close, if that makes sense. So just because your journey together in riding is ending doesn't mean that you can't find joy sharing your horse with somebody else, or maybe having your horse in the field getting to teach the little young guys how to behave or whatever that is. There are still ways to enjoy our horses without riding them ourselves. So it's a hard one. And if you have any concerns, it's, talk to your coach, talk to your vet, and ask them for some honesty. I don't know a vet out there that won't be honest with you about those sort of things. That's a great question. And it's a hard one, but I'm glad you asked it. So thank you. Paula says, I have a gelding, 26 or more. He's in great condition, but he passes a lot of gas and loose poo if we put anything different in his diet. He gets a little exercise a few times a week, walking, mainly a little trotting. We've tried different gut additives, but it doesn't seem to help. Any ideas would be appreciated. Oh, great question. So sometimes that does happen as they get a little older. So you want to consult with an equine nutritionist, make sure they're getting enough forage in their diet. So basically the hay. Sometimes grass can be a little rich. So sometimes having a little bit more of dry forage will help. Checking the water to see if other horses are like that. The biggest thing too, I find, is people change their feed too quickly. You should change or introduce feed over a 3-week period. So if that makes sense, so you do a little bit at a time so that the horse has a chance to come accustomed to it. And some horses are just a little bit more sensitive than others. Really great question. Let's see what other questions we have. What signs do you look for when retiring an older horse? We went over that a little bit. And like I said, listen to people around you, ask them what they think, listen to your horse and how much they can keep up with the work that you're asking them to do. And then Tina says, what are some creative ways to ride an elder horse that are fun and challenging, like dressage? Great question, Tina. I love doing things with other people. I've been bugging Amelia for ages to do my exercise called the carousel horse exercise. I think it's so much fun. And basically, you can do it with one other person or like 5 or 6 other people, and you go in a 20-meter circle and you try and keep equal distance around the circle in walk, trot, and canter if you'd like, but canter is really hard. And so I find that fun because you get to do it with somebody else, and it gets to be a giggle fest sometimes, but exercises with other people, practicing quadrille moves, see if you can follow down the long side, looking where the other person is, keeping the same pace. That's really fun. Sometimes doing things like little working equitation patterns, that sort of stuff can make it more interesting than just circle after circle after circle and walk. Sometimes I also just suggest to people to take a peek at the para tests, because the para tests have ones that are specifically in walk and trot. Sometimes they're quite hard, but it might give you some other patterns and exercises to think about or things to work on that aren't a full walk, trot, canter test. Great question. Another question says, can you talk about when your horse halts nicely but not squarely? In practice, do you just correct it, or could it be cause of a bad habit? Great question, Janet. So to halt our horses a bit more in balance and to get them square, they have to be round over their back and pushing from the energy from behind to the front. Remember that connection only comes in on first level. So the more connected and round you ride your horse, the more they'll be able to balance themselves in a square halt. It's fantastic that he's halting when you say halt. That's half of the battle right there. But getting them more balanced and round in their back gives them a better posture. It's a little bit like running full out, leaning forward, and then like stopping, like trying to stop and you kind of waver, versus running and in balance and extending your legs and then stopping. You're in a better position to control your momentum. Really great question. Let's see, what other questions do I have? I only have a few more minutes. Dressage by Nicole. Nick says, there was a horse that competed at CDI a few years back that was 21. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so it's definitely possible to ride our older horses into the more advanced movements. And like I said, a little bit like Peppy, like riding our horses round, getting them to lift their belly, round their back, extend their spine so their bones come away from each other, and they tip their pelvis under and they lift us and carry us better, actually allows them to move more effectively and feel better with their body. Riding round is like Pilates. Like you feel good after it. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm done Pilates, I always drag my feet to do it, and then I get finished. I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much better with my own body after a Pilates session. So sometimes you just need to ride your horse round or do a session of Pilates and you'll feel a lot better. But yeah, so I think I've gotten through all of the questions. One more question that's come in. How do you know if on certain days that they're achier or they're just trying to pull your leg and being lazy? That's a really great question. Probably a little bit the indication is what the normal is. If your horse is known to be a little bit behind the leg even when they're younger, then they might be a little bit behind the leg there. And that's where knowing your horse comes really in handy. Sometimes when I put my leg on for a horse and they, if they pin their ears back or they shake their head, and I kind of go, ooh, that's very unusual for them. And that's a communicative sign that like something's not quite right. Excessive tail swishing, like I said, snaky of the neck, excessive tilting of the head, things like that. You look for the signs and symptoms that the horse is communicating that they're not happy, right? And it can be as subtle as pursed lips. It could be as subtle as the eye squinting a little bit. Sometimes the ears go sideways if their horse isn't feeling well. Signs that aren't in the horse's normal behavior. So, for example, if I know that a horse that I ride, when I start warming him up, he likes to, give a little snake in the first canter. And he does that when he's older, when he's 21, 22. I'm not going to worry about it as much as if my purse that's really good in the contact, when she's 22 and she starts shaking her head, I might be like, ooh, maybe you might be a bit achier today. Another great indication is when you groom your horse, if you get one of those, like the rubber curry combs that have the little prongs on them. I really like those because as I'm grooming, it's almost like a massage, and you'll find the places where the horse goes, oh, that's good. And they'll stretch out their neck and their lip will start to go like they're grooming another horse. It's always the most fun. And then sometimes they widen their back and they go, oh, that feels good. Like get right there. And then you can feel when you're grooming the horse what kind of day it's going to be based on how the horse is reacting to you just palpating their body, right? And actually, one of my mares, she was diagnosed with, she had a tear in her fascia in her back. So we struggled really for a very long time rehabbing her, because some days I would come out and she'd be really, really uncomfortable in her body. And some days I would come out and she'd be absolutely fine. And so when I was grooming her, I knew where the tear in her fascia was. And so when I would palpate that, when she came out, I could feel based on her reactions, what she did with her eyes, her neck, her tail, her legs. I could tell what kind of day it was. And if I couldn't quite tell, or she looked okay, when I went to sit on her, and then you have to kind of have a good feel for this, I could feel if her back would drop or if her back stayed steady. And if her back dropped, I knew it was a day where she was feeling a little bit more sore, because she was a bit more like, ooh, that's not quite as comfortable, right? So being able to know what your horse's normal is and being able to see those signs and communicative elements really helps you be able to aid your horse when they get a little bit older. And sometimes that's not possible because we get horses when they're 17, 18, 19. So we don't know necessarily what their normal is, but finding out from their previous owners, being able to groom them a few times when you try them, that sort of thing. Or even as you get to know them through the months of that you owning them, you'll start to learn their little habits and quips and things like that. And then you can start to see deviations. And then that's when you can say, okay, they might be a bit more sore today, rather than pulling your leg and actually not that, and actually just being lazy or ignoring you. Really good question. But yeah, our horses getting older can be a really hard thing at times, but I think it's also such a lovely thing that we get to age with our horses, and our horses get to grow up a little bit with us. And like I said, they're such goldy oldies. Like, older horses are worth their weight in gold. And I think so many people overlook them because they're 17, 18, like they're quote unquote at the end of their career, but sometimes it's the best part of their career. And because they're a bit more mentally stable, they're a bit more seasoned, and then you can do a little bit more with them because you've got the seasonality on behind it. They're a little bit more experienced. They're not quite as hot, maybe, that sort of thing. And I think also too, when we have older horses, people sometimes forget, like, we can share them with the people we love a little bit, right? I have a friend and she was like, oh, I think I really want to get a new young horse. And I was kind of like, you have a 3-year-old daughter. Like, you've got this great mare. Like, why would you want to give that up that you can do pony rides on, you can go trail riding, and your little daughter can sit up there. And I was like, if you get a young horse, your daughter won't be able to even be in the cross ties with her for another few years. So having these older horses that are more steady Eddie, that are a little bit slower, that are more seasoned, you can share them with the people you love in life, which I think is so important. And what's fun about it, right? And even, like I said, as our horses age and maybe they can't do what we want them to do anymore as a partnership, it doesn't mean you can't find enjoyment with them. Like I said, with that older horse in our barn, Cookie, she's 26. She's fantastic, and her owner is the sweetest woman in the world. And she used to be a CET jumper at like hunter, like medal equitation horse, and her daughter used to like went to nationals and stuff on her. Like she was incredibly talented, and then she came and became a dressage horse for the barn owner, the mom, and then Cookie got a little older, right? And she couldn't go out and compete as much anymore, and I had a young friend, and she lost her leased horse very suddenly, and she didn't have anything to ride, and she didn't really have money to like lease a new horse for a while. And the barn said, well, she could come and ride Cookie a few days a week if she wanted. And she just had so much enjoyment seeing this young girl being able to enjoy Cookie and learn how to do her changes. And Cookie's just plods away and happy as could be, like taking care of the kid and and finding a way to share our horses regardless of what job they have and what they do for us under saddle. It's about finding those ways to find enjoyment even without us necessarily, right? So it's hard with the horses as they get older, but it's also a privilege to be able to see them grow with other people, and it's lovely in that sense. So I think I've gotten to all the questions, so I think I'm going to let you go for tonight, but hopefully I've given you some things to think about and some ways to consider with your horses. And like I said, even if they're starting to show signs that they might not be able to continue on just yet or just at the level you're doing, there is ways to still find that love and enjoyment with your horses as they get a little bit older. So have a lovely evening. We will see you all next time, and Amelia will be back next week